Recent breakthroughs in AI have achieved great advances in language tasks, visual understanding, and even math problem solving. But motor control hasn't had its ChatGPT moment. Motor control is a sophisticated process central to a biological organism. Take golfing, for example. Professional golfers will take plenty of time preparing their next swing. And during the swing itself, ongoing state estimation will always track the body and club configuration based on a variety of sensory cues. And this also enables feedback control to make any necessary changes rapidly. Most importantly, our environment is never stationary. Rapid changes in context will also require adjustments to the way we perform planning, state estimation, and feedback control. For example, when facing a strong wind, you might want to plan a harder strike. And when using different tools, which is different clubs in this case, it will also require different swinging styles. So to maintain a proficiency, facing changes in context, all these key components of motor control must be rapidly and jointly reconfigured in a consistent manner. Moreover, the context itself should also be inferred from limited experience. Here we ask what network principle might underlie such rapid and coordinated adaptation to contextual changes. So decades of experimental studies in biological motor control has pointed to a highly distributed network involving many brain areas. The motor cortex implements a form of optimal feedback control, preparing and executing motor commands that is appropriate given the current state of the world. But the state of the world is not something we get to directly observe. We also must infer it. And this is done by the sensory cortices that tries to infer the current state and also predict its future evolution. So the cerebellum is also thought to be involved in all these lower level processes. At a higher level, things like processing task goals and inferring the current context likely involves higher order regions such as the prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia. Finally, how information flows between these different regions is also under active study. And there's an emerging view that the thalamus could act as a bottleneck or a flexible hub for information routing. So all of this is very complex, and a better understanding of a biological motor control will require an interpretable and distributed network that brings all these components together as a whole. So inspired by this, we propose a multi-area RNN model that does exactly this. So given that motor control is plagued by noise and uncertainty at all levels, we use the language of probabilities to formalize the computation to train this RNN. So at a broader conceptual level, our model is trained to do exactly one simple thing: maximize the likelihood of observing the desired state. So this requires integrating out all the stuff we are uncertain about. This includes the environmental context alpha, the environmental state S, and even the motor commands U. So integrating all this out is intractable. So we postulate that the brain uses a standard trick, variational inference, and the various RNN components I'm about to describe next can be thought of as a modular components of this recognition model. So now let's work through the division of labor in this recognition model. First, a forward model will consume delayed and noisy sensory signals with average copies of the model commands, and it tries to infer the current state. And then a control policy network receives this state estimation and tries to infer the model commands U which is consistent with the desirable future state as star. So finally, contextual inference network will try to integrate the history of all observations and actions and forms a belief over the current latent context alpha. Critically, both the forward model and the the forward model and the control policy model, these two lower level policy network are in fact also conditioned on this latent context at all times. So all of these computational processes are implemented through standard RNN dynamics, and mechanistically, conditioning on context is achieved by letting the contextual inference modulate the gain of the thalamic neurons, which in turn weights the contribution of specific transthalamic pathways. So mathematically, this is equivalent to making context-dependent low-rank modification to the effective connectivity both within the forward and inverse model and also in their interactions. So in summary, we simultaneously train a hierarchical generative model of the sensory observation and also a structured and modular recognition model to perform control as inference in a dynamically changing environment. Now, to test this multi-area network, we will need a set of tasks that involve diverse contexts, but also still share some similarity between trials. For this, we turn to 2D synthetic hand-reaching tasks under changing force field. And here, the force field will represent different contexts, and the hand-reaching tasks are the similarities shared between contexts. So under one context, each trial will contain several stages. So you will start with a central fixation and then prepare after target shown. And after the goal cue, it is encouraged to move to the target under a certain force field. And then after reaching the target, it will encourage to be back to the center. And for the next trial, it will involve a different target, but still under the same force field. And there's a small possibilities that the context will change to a new context, which involve a completely new force field. So the change in the context is abrupt and also uncued, such that the only way for the network to realize there is a change in the context is to observe any persistent mismatch between the predicted and actual hand trajectories. Now, after meta-training the multi-area network under a diverse set of force fields, we freeze the parameter and test the behavior in some test trials through the network dynamics. And we can see that the model quickly changed its control policy after a large detour facing a new context, which is a light color here, is the first trial. It also immediately adapts after a washout, where the learned force field is removed. And on average, our model can adapt, perform better and better with more and more trials of interactions with the same context, both for state estimation and for feedback control, while training a similar-sized single GRU with similar division of labor, except for the contextual module, it failed to produce adaptive result. So we further compare our model on neural activities with monkey data. So Sun and Rui Xia et al. Have a paper on monkey doing similar reaching tasks under force field, and they find a particular rotation of manifolds in the preparatory subspace triggered by adaptation to force field. And here, preparatory neural activities are projected onto a subspace most predictive of future ballistic movements. And each color here will denote a different target location. And by learning a force field, here either counterclockwise or clockwise, the 2D ring manifold rotate in the opposite direction as a composition for the force field. And we carried out a similar analysis on the preparatory activities on the neurons in the control policy network and find similar results. Furthermore, they find a third axis where there is a uniform shift for all targets triggered by learning and acting like a motor memory trace. And we carry out, again, the same analysis, and where we find uniform shifts in opposite directions for opposing curve fields. So the neural analysis I have shown here only constrained to preparatory activities, while our model actually provide a much larger framework involving multiple regions to allow study beyond feed-forward adaptation, but also allow a study of adaptation during feedback control, and also allow the role of cerebellum in adaptation, etc. So by integrating neural and behavioral data, models like this can advance our understanding of adaptive motor control. Thank you.